Nobody tells you this, but the biggest difference between people who struggle with money and people who quietly build wealth is not talent, it's not luck, and it's definitely not intelligence. It's something far more dangerous, something invisible, something you were never taught to see. Because while you were growing up, learning how to behave, how to fit in, how to survive, there were others learning how money actually works. Not from books, not from school, but from the conversations happening at dinner tables, from the habits they watched every day, from the decisions their parents made without even explaining them. And by the time they became adults, they weren't trying to figure money out. They were already playing a completely different game. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You didn't lose the game. You were never told the rules. And once you see those rules, you start to realize something chilling. Wealth isn't built in public. It's built quietly, over time, inside systems most people never even notice. Here's where most people go wrong. They think money problems are about effort. So they work harder, longer hours, more stress, more sacrifice, and for a while, it feels like progress. But then something strange happens. No matter how hard they push, they stay in the same place. Or worse, they make more money, but somehow feel even more broke. Because the real problem isn't effort, it's direction. You were taught to chase income, not build systems. You were taught to save, but not to multiply. You were taught to avoid risk, but never how to understand it. So you end up doing everything right and still getting nowhere. And deep down, you start asking yourself, why does it feel so hard for me, but so effortless for others? That's when frustration turns into doubt. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm just unlucky. Maybe success isn't for people like me. But that's the lie. Because what you're experiencing isn't failure, it's misalignment. You're playing a short-term survival game in a world where wealth is built long-term. And until that changes, nothing else will. Let's shift the lens for a moment. What if money isn't something you earn, but something you learn to control? Because here's what most people never realize. Wealth is not built by working harder. It's built by thinking differently, quietly, consistently. Over time, there are people who make less than you, but end up with more. Not because they're smarter, but because they see money differently. To them, money isn't something to spend. It's something to direct. It's not about how much did I make. It's about where did it go and what is it doing now. That's the shift. The moment you stop seeing money as an outcome and start seeing it as a tool, everything begins to change, because tools are meant to be used, sharpened, positioned, and multiplied. And here's the deeper layer most people miss. This way of thinking doesn't appear randomly. It's trained, passed down, repeated until it becomes automatic, just like someone who grows up hearing, be careful with money. Another grows up hearing, make money work for you. Same world, completely different results. So the real question is no longer, how do I make more money? It becomes, what system of thinking am I operating under? Because once you see that, you stop chasing money and you start building control. Let's break this down, not into tips, not into hacks, but into the quiet rules that actually shape how wealth is built. 1, they don't chase money, they design flow. Most people wake up thinking, how do I make money today? But wealth-driven minds ask a different question. How does money move through my life? Because income is temporary, flow is permanent. If money comes in and immediately goes out, you don't have wealth. You have motion, and motion feels like progress, but it's not. Real wealth begins the moment money starts staying and then working even when you're not. 2, they build environments, not just habits. You've heard it before, build good habits. But here's the truth, habits are fragile. Environment is powerful. if you're surrounded by people who spend impulsively conversations that avoid money, fear around investing, you will eventually absorb it. But in the right environment, you don't need discipline all the time because the default behavior changes. And over time, your results follow. 3, they separate emotion from decisions. Most financial mistakes are emotional. Fear makes people hold too long. Ego makes people spend too much. Impatience makes people quit too early. But wealth thinking creates distance, not coldness, clarity. Instead of reacting, they observe. Instead of rushing, they calculate. And that small gap between emotion and action, that's where better decisions are made. 4, they value access more than ownership. Most people want to own things, cars, houses, status. But wealth-oriented thinking asks, do I need to own this or just access it? Because ownership comes with cost, maintenance, time, responsibility. But access gives you flexibility. And flexibility creates leverage. 5, they think in systems, not moments. Most people make isolated decisions. I'll save this month. I'll invest next year. I'll figure it out later. But wealth isn't built in moments. It's built in systems, automated behaviors, repeated patterns, consistent action. Small decisions, stacked over time, become outcomes you can't ignore. 6, they measure what others ignore. What gets measured grows. But most people don't track anything, not their spending, not their investments, not their habits. So they live in a fog. Wealth-oriented thinkers, they bring clarity. They know where their money goes, what's working, what's not. And that awareness alone changes behavior. 7, they build with others, not alone. This is the part people underestimate the most. Wealth grows faster in connection. Opportunities come from people. Ideas grow through conversations. Trust opens doors. But most people isolate themselves, trying to figure everything out alone. And that slows everything down because in reality, the fastest way to grow is to grow with others. Let's make this real, because right now, this might still feel abstract. So imagine 2 people, same age, same income, same starting point, but completely different outcomes. Person A lives in the moment. Money comes in and disappears just as fast. A reward here, a treat there, a little upgrade because I deserve it. Nothing extreme, nothing reckless, just small emotional decisions. Over and over again, at the end of the month, nothing left. At the end of the year, still starting over. Person B lives in a system. Money comes in, but before anything else happens, it gets assigned. A portion moves into growth. A portion stays for stability. A portion is used intentionally, not restricted, directed, same income. But now money has a job. And over time, those small, quiet decisions start stacking. Now, fast forward 5 years, person A says, I don't know where my money went. Person B says, I don't know how this grew so fast. That's the difference. Not effort, not intelligence, structure. Another way to see it, think of money like water. If you pour water onto the ground, it spreads, disappears, gone. But if you build channels, pipes, direction, that same water can power an entire system. Your life is no different. Money without direction disappears. Money with structure multiplies. And here's the part most people miss. Neither person felt a huge difference day to day. No dramatic change, no instant breakthrough, just small decisions repeated quietly. That's why it's so dangerous, because by the time you notice, the gap is already wide. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because once you understand all of this, you can't blame the system anymore. You start to see something deeper. Most people don't just lack knowledge, they resist change. Not consciously, but quietly, because changing how you handle money means changing how you see yourself. It means admitting, maybe what I've been doing isn't working, and that's hard. Ego fights that. Comfort fights that. Even your environment might fight that. Because the moment you start thinking differently, you stop fitting in. You question things others accept. You say no when others say yes. You delay when others indulge. And suddenly you feel out of place. But here's the truth. Most people avoid. Growth is lonely before it becomes powerful. At first, it feels like loss. Less spending, less approval, less instant gratification. But what you're really doing is creating space. Space for control, space for clarity, space for something bigger. And then something shifts slowly, quietly. You stop reacting to money and start directing it. You stop feeling anxious and start feeling intentional. You stop chasing and start building. And the people around you, some will question you, some will misunderstand you, some will stay exactly where they are, but a few will notice. And those few, they're thinking the same way you are. That's how new environments are built. That's how new circles form. That's how wealth begins to compound. Not just financially, but mentally, because in the end, money is not the hardest thing to change. Identity is, and once that shifts, everything else follows. So here's the truth. Wealth was never hiding from you. It was never locked behind some secret or reserved for a chosen few. It was always there. In the way people think, in the way they decide, in the way they move through life quietly, consistently. But most people miss it. Not because it's complicated, but because it's subtle. There's no moment where everything suddenly changes. No dramatic breakthrough, no overnight transformation, just small shifts that most people ignore. A different conversation, a different decision, a different way of seeing money. Repeat it again and again until one day your life looks completely different. And people will say, you got lucky. They had an advantage. They were in the right place. But you'll know the truth. You didn't find wealth. You built it, piece by piece, decision by decision. So now you're standing at a quiet crossroads. Nothing around you has changed, but you see the patterns, you understand the game, and that gives you something most people never have. A choice to keep living the way you always have, or to start thinking like someone who builds wealth, even before they have it. Because the moment your thinking changes, your direction changes. And when your direction changes, your future follows. The question is no longer, can you become wealthy? The real question is, will you choose to think differently long enough for it to happen?